in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. I am a concubine of the patriarch of the G family. A concubine must stand. That is her place. I stand to serve the master. I stand to serve the madam. Even when I gave birth to Julian G, I did so while standing. When Julian was 5 years old, he innocently asked me, "Mother, why are you not allowed to sit at the table to eat?" I gave a bitter, soft smile and replied, "Mother is a concubine. I cannot rise to the table." The little child looked at me with absolute seriousness and said, "Then I will think of a way for you." Years later, when Julian had achieved great merit, the emperor asked what reward he desired. He replied, word for word, "I humbly beseech your majesty to grant my mother the right to sit at the dining table." The House of Ji was a renowned and illustrious clan in Ningzhou. Their ancestors boasted 3 grand secretaries and 6 ministers. Portraits of 2 of these grand secretaries still hang to this day in the pavilion reserved for loyal officials. However, it was a pity that in recent generations, the descendants had become sparse. There was no longer anyone with outstanding talent or learning to assume high office. Gradually, the family was pushed out of the center of power and forced to return to their ancestral home in Ningzhou. After the pain came the awakening. The patriarch, Marcus G, thought long and hard. He concluded that the House of G was losing simply because there were too few descendants. 1 or 2 sons might struggle to achieve great things, but what if there were 10 or 20? With the excellent bloodline that had once produced so many talents for the G family, how could there not be at least one useful child among them? No sooner thought than done. Marcus ruthlessly abolished the 100-year-old family rule. He decreed that any son of the G clan under the age of 30, even without an heir, could freely take concubines. The requirements for a concubine were not beauty or talent. They simply needed a strong body and to be easy to breed. Matron Wu, the female steward, followed Marcus's orders and searched the estate for half a day. When she stepped into the kitchen, she saw me, healthy, wheat-colored skin, a balanced figure, wide hips, and a full waist. One look and she knew this was a rare body built for childbearing. From that day on, I went from being a kitchen maid to a bed-chamber servant. A maid specialized in serving the master in bed. The master was very satisfied with this fertile body. Every few days, he was diligent in sowing his seed upon me. I did not disappoint him. After serving him for less than a month, I was pregnant. Excellent, excellent. The master clapped his hands in unceasing joy and immediately promoted me to a lowly concubine. Compared to a chambermaid with no name and no status, the rank of a lowly concubine was much better. I no longer had to do manual labor and was assigned a small, private courtyard with 2 maids to serve me. But all of this was merely within the confines of my own tiny corner of the sky. Every day, I still had to go to the courtyard of the first wife, Lady Catherine Shao, precisely on time to pay my respects. I had to stand and serve her and the 2 legitimate sons while they dined. Lady Catherine loathed concubines, and she especially hated those who were pregnant. During meals, she always found ways to make things difficult for me. The food was too salty, or a bit too bland, too hot, or too cold. Anything was a reason to scold me harshly. Serving lunch for an hour would leave my back aching and numb. Only after cleaning up everything was I allowed to eat a few bites of cold leftovers in the corner of the kitchen. Lady Catherine sneered coldly, "Humiliating you. A concubine is a class of woman who only knows how to stand, never able to raise her head for a lifetime. Since you chose to be a concubine, you must have the enlightenment to stand and serve your mistress well. If you make even the slightest mistake, the master won't be able to save you." Hearing those words, a bitter taste rose in my heart. It was not as if I had volunteered to be a concubine. In the House of G, the master was the sky. People like us, mere grass and trash, had no right to refuse. Catherine dared not oppose the master, so she vented all her resentment onto us, the weaker concubines. It was truly laughable. I dared not feel resentment, nor did I dare to talk back. I only tried harder to serve Lady Catherine even more thoughtfully. It wasn't that Catherine hadn't thought of dealing with the fetus in my womb. But the master valued offspring above all else. She dared not openly lay a heavy hand. She could only use petty tricks to torment me. Fortunately, I was always cautious, and my body was strong. After enduring 100 trials and 1,000 hardships, the child was finally born safely. Knowing it was a boy, my heart was filled with both joy and worry. Joy, because he was a male, he could study, take examinations, and establish a name for himself, unlike a daughter who would be buried in the inner chambers all her life. Worry, because to protect the status of her legitimate sons, Catherine would certainly not tolerate a bastard son. Whether my son could live peacefully to adulthood was something unpredictable. The thought just flashed through my mind, but I immediately shook my head violently to dispel it. This was my child. Even if I had to risk my life, I had to protect him and ensure he grew up safe and sound. Because Lady Catherine already had legitimate sons, she didn't bother to pay attention to a concubine's son, so the child was allowed to stay by my side as he grew up. And what of the master? Desiring to sire more bastard sons, he spent his days visiting the courtyards of the various concubines and chambermaids. Bowl after bowl of pregnancy tonics was sent down, and bellies throughout the estate swelled up one after another. During that time, Catherine secretly caused several concubines to miscarry. But her speed of weeding out the sprouts could not compare to the master's speed of sowing seeds. Furthermore, she was plotted against by a few concubines and was repeatedly reprimanded by the master. Wanting to strike again became increasingly difficult, so she simply decided to ignore it and stop managing them. The master also stopped by my courtyard a few times, but I had long since secretly taken extremely cooling contraceptive medicine. My body was no longer as robust as before, so I could not conceive again. I was never the type of beauty the master favored. Sowing repeatedly without result made him lose interest, and he ceased coming. When no one was around, I sighed softly. With a humble status like mine, giving birth to one son was enough to attract attention. If I continued to give birth, I would inevitably become a thorn in Lady Catherine's eye. Since I didn't have the strength to protect another one, why bring them into this world? Putting all my heart into raising little Jules was enough. Under my careful care, Jules gradually grew up. The little child inherited the intelligent bloodline of the G family ancestors. At only 5 years old, he already knew how to read and write, matching couplets and composing verses with a wisdom surpassing ordinary people. In those 5 years, children in the estate were born one batch after another. There were now more than 20 bastard sons and daughters. Every time there was a gathering or a banquet, the room was packed. Although they were young, they were all little masters, and when mealtime came they had their own seats. As for us, the concubines, chambermaids, and servants, we were mere slaves. We could only stand behind the master, the madam, and the crowd of little masters, diligently serving dishes and carefully attending to them. Jules was a filial son. Seeing me suffering, he couldn't bear it. Suddenly, he jumped off his chair, his little legs toddling quickly towards me. He grabbed my hand, intending to lead me toward his seat. "Mother, come here and sit." I was startled and hurriedly shook my head, cold sweat pouring from my forehead. I was about to kneel to admit my guilt when Lady Catherine's sharp, cold gaze fell straight upon me. "Concubine Lily, how bold. You barely have a foothold here, and already you want to sit at the table to eat. This slave dares not." I hurriedly fell to my knees, kowtowing repeatedly toward the madam. This slave and her son are fortunate to have the madam's protection to have a place in this estate. We absolutely dare not have any thoughts of overstepping our bounds. I begged the madam for mercy. Seeing me kneel, Jules also knelt down with me, but he refused to yield. Instead, he asked seriously, "Mother, why are we not allowed to sit at the table to eat?" Lady Catherine glanced at Jules, her eyes revealing a disdain that was hard to conceal. "Because your mother is just a little concubine." A concubine is a type of woman who only knows how to stand. For her entire life, she is merely a slave to the master's family. How can she sit not to fully understand? He turned his eyes toward the master. "Father? Is it truly so?" In an aristocratic clan, etiquette and hierarchy were the most important things. Even though the master loved this intelligent son, he had to sternly shout that the madam's words were completely correct. If a great clan wants to prosper, the order cannot be overturned. Since this is your first offense, I will forgive you. If you repeat it, I will definitely not show mercy. Jules's small face was still full of doubt, but seeing me kneeling on the ground, my forehead already bleeding from kowtowing, he finally said nothing more and obediently returned to his seat. The master spared Jules, but Lady Catherine had no intention of letting it go. She took a sip of tea, looking sternly at the master. "Without rules, nothing can take shape. Julian is so young, yet he does something so beneath his status. In the final analysis, it is because he was taught poorly by concubine Lily." The master's cold gaze swept over me, as if looking at an eyesore. He shouted, "Get out and kneel. You may stand up only when you understand hierarchy and order." That day, I was punished by kneeling for 6 hours in Lady Catherine's courtyard. It wasn't until midnight that I dragged my numb and exhausted legs, limping back to my small courtyard, I found Jules curled up into a ball, sleeping on the stone steps in front of the door. No need to ask, he had certainly sneaked away from the supervision of the maids and matron Wu, silently waiting for me for a long time. Tears instantly welled up in the corners of my eyes. I unconsciously walked faster, wanting to hold that tiny body tightly in my arms. But because I was moving too hastily, my legs, stiff from kneeling, gave way and I stumbled, falling to the ground. The sound of my body hitting the earth woke Jules. He rubbed his sleepy eyes with his small hands. Seeing clearly that it was me, he immediately burst into tears. Mother. Jules was wrong. It is all my fault that you were punished. The bright moon hung high, illuminating Jules's pitch black eyes even more clearly. Yet, at this moment, those eyes, which should have been clear and carefree, were filled with fear and anxiety. That look should not have appeared on the face of a 5-year-old child. Why did such a good child have to reincarnated into the womb of a concubine like me? In the end, it was I who had burdened him. My heart felt squeezed to the point of pain. I gritted my teeth, forcing the tears back inside. I raised my sleeve to wipe the tears from his face, smiling gently. Jules loves his mother, that is not wrong. To expect a 5-year-old child to understand this strict and cruel world of hierarchy is truly too cruel. Jules seemed to remember something and nodded very seriously. Mother, rest assured. One day, I will definitely make sure you can sit at the table and eat with dignity. From that day on, Jules put even more effort into reading and studying. As soon as the sky turned bright, he would immediately go to the study hall. In the evening after class, he would stay behind, asking the teacher for more instruction. Working so hard he was practically tying his hair to a beam and pricking his thigh to stay awake. Emulating the extreme discipline of ancient scholars to study day and night, Jules was already more intelligent than others, added to that was his diligence and industry. His academic achievements improved by leaps and bounds. Many times, he was praised by the teacher, who said his future was limitless. Not only did he surpass the bastard sons of the same age, but even the two legitimate sons who were several years older were left far behind in the dust. Because Marcus wanted to revive the family's reputation, he had been diligently sowing seeds for years. Now, finally seeing the fruits of his labor, planting wide and harvesting thick, he held Jules and laughed heartily, unable to close his mouth. The master was happy, but I could not be at peace. Tall trees in the forest are sure to be struck by the wind. Jules was young but too intelligent. He was no different from a thorn stabbing straight into the eyes of Lady Catherine and the two legitimate young masters. Even the crowd of bastard sons who had been surpassed were grinding their teeth in anger. If I was careless for even a moment, disaster would befall Jules. The malice arrived even sooner than I expected. Someone quietly threw a poisonous snake into Jules's desk. His inkstone, brushes, and paper were smashed to pieces. His books, full of notes, were torn into shreds, flying like falling snow. His clothes were drawn on with pictures of turtles from behind. When he went to the latrine, someone suddenly rushed out, threw a burlap sack over his head, and beat him severely. Vicious words echoed in his ears without ceasing. A bastard born of a kitchen maid dares to compete with the eldest young master and the second young master. Why don't you look in the mirror? So what if you can read? In the future, your fate is just to be a servant. That slut mother of yours can't even serve a meal properly. She was punished by the madam to go scrub chamber pots. No wonder you stink so much. Turns out, you are the son of a big louse who gave birth to a little louse. The malice of the children followed every vicious word, like sharp thorns stabbing straight into Julian's flesh. But then, it would pass like a breeze. No one could be caught. If Julian dared to complain to Master Marcus, they would deny it completely. He was isolated and weak, unable to stir up any waves. Being a tattletale would only make the master more annoyed. Toxic words are like invisible knives. A person's energy and spirit are ground down by daily humiliation until, finally, they collapse, unable to rise again. Watching Julian become more silent and haggard by the day, my heart felt as if it were boiling in a cauldron of oil. The pain was unbearable. I hugged his small body tightly. The endless days of humiliation caused my tears to fall like rain, impossible to hold back. Julian, be good, I whispered. Mother does not ask for high honors or a great career for you. I only wish for you to live in peace. Compared to my anxious and fearful appearance, Julian was incredibly calm, like a miniature adult. He gently patted my shoulder. Mother, rest assured. Very soon, we will no longer be bullied. No one understands them better than you. Seeing the rare, radiant smile that had been missing for so long appear on Julian's face, a sudden, intense unease rose in my heart. I hurriedly asked, "Julian, what do you intend to do?" "I cannot hide it from mother," he whispered, burying his head in my chest. "I am so small, what can I possibly do? But the autumn banquet is coming soon. As long as I perform well, father will value me." 3 days later was the autumn banquet, held once a year. The autumn banquet was a tradition of the aristocratic families. Using the excuse of admiring the autumn scenery, they invited famous scholars and talented men from all over Ningzhou to gather. At the banquet, people would build connections through poetry and literature, competing in talent. If a talented young man was found, they would do their best to sponsor him or take him in as a retainer, waiting for the day he passed the imperial exams so they could share in the glory and advancement. Over time, factions formed in the imperial court based on these regional connections, creating a power that could not be underestimated. This year, the autumn banquet was hosted by the House of Ji. Normally, a child of a few years old would have no place at such a gathering. But Marcus, having waited so many years for a son as intelligent as Julian, wanted to show him off. He decisively called a dozen of his sons to attend. During the banquet, the adults raised their cups in toast, and both hosts and guests were joyous. Soon, it was time for the poetry competition. This year, the families had brought many talented youths, and the levels of poetic skill were clearly distinguishable. Because the children of the Ji family were still young, each only dared to recite a memorized poem by a famous figure to suit the occasion. Yet, quite a few still stuttered or recited incorrectly. Very quickly it was Julian's turn. Although Julian was young, he was incredibly composed. He stepped forward and bowed respectfully to the elders. Unlike his brothers who recited memorized verses, Julian calmly picked up a brush and wrote a 5-character quatrain on the paper. A child so young possessing such demeanor instantly attracted everyone's eyes. People crowded around to watch. Every time he finished writing a line, sounds of admiration erupted from the crowd. What excellent poetry! To have such intuition at a young age is truly rare. Only 5 years old and he can compose such fine verse. This is a prodigy. Perhaps our Ningzhou is about to have the youngest scholar in history. Brother Marcus, you are truly blessed to have birthed such an intelligent son. The master rubbed Julian's head with one hand lovingly and stroked his beard with the other, his smile stretching from ear to ear. Brothers, you praise him too much. The uncles and elders praise me much. Julian is ashamed and dares not accept it. Julian replied humbly. Amidst the continuous praise, Julian's humble words were not even finished when suddenly, he frowned in pain. Then puffed. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Julian. Seeing my son's small body collapse to the ground, I, who was standing behind Lady Catherine, let out a wretched scream. Disregarding the rule that women must not make a scene, I threw myself straight at my son. Black blood was oozing from the corner of his mouth. One look and anyone could tell poison. The master had placed great expectations on this son. Witnessing this scene, his entire body trembled, and he roared like thunder. Physician. Call the physician immediately. Aristocratic families were always thorough. Banquets attended by officials and nobles always had several physicians on standby nearby, in case of sudden illness. In just a moment, a physician arrived. His technique was skilled. Seeing it was poison, he immediately used silver needles to seal the heart meridians, then quickly applied acupuncture to various points. When the silver needle was pulled out, it was stained pitch black. Reporting to the master, the 6th young master has been poisoned with cinnabar. The dosage is not light. Julian. I saw the world tilting and spinning. I cried out loudly, pointing my finger at the group of G family sons standing behind Marcus. It is you. It wasn't enough to beat and humiliate Julian every day, now you want to take his life too. I will fight you to the death. For years, I had always endured. In front of Lady Catherine or the other concubines, I always bowed my head and spoke softly. Everyone knew I was weak and useless, but now, my sudden explosion of rage truly caught people off guard. Even though the children were under 10 years old, no matter how malicious their hearts, they were terrified by my ferocious expression. But I did not stop. Instead, I shouted even louder, ensuring everyone could hear every word clearly. Because Julian is studious and praised by the master, they bred jealousy in their hearts. Time and time again they humiliated my son. I am a mother, but I am incompetent. I could not protect my own child. I only want to beg the master for justice. I continued, my voice breaking. Julian said we are all brothers of the same house. How could they turn their faces and become enemies? He believed if he endured for a while, they would get bored. I never expected them to be so cruel as to want to snatch my son's life. This concubine's life is humble, my death is worth nothing. I only beg the master to seek justice for Julian. Aristocratic families valued face above all else. No matter how much filth was inside, they had to maintain a harmonious exterior. This was called domestic shame must not be made public. But I deliberately wanted to tear apart that so-called face amidst thousands of guests. With every sentence I spoke, Marcus's face darkened another shade. As for the guests standing around, some frowned, some shook their heads. They exchanged glances and understood silently. This child was good in every way, except for one mistake: he was not born into the womb of the main wife, a bastard son born of a lowly concubine, intelligent to that extent, yet revealing his talent so frankly without reservation. It was no different from a death warrant. Thinking this, the eyes of everyone looking toward Lady Catherine gradually became complicated. Catherine was panicked inside. She wanted to defend herself but didn't know where to start. While she was still considering, Marcus spoke first in a deep voice. Is this how you manage the household every day, master? This concubine. Catherine finally woke up to the reality and felt fear. Her voice trembled noticeably. A bastard child could die. He could fall into the lotus pond and drown. He could accidentally inhale charcoal fumes and suffocate. He could have a high fever that wasn't treated in time and die of illness. All of that was acceptable. The only thing that could not happen was dying by poison right in front of nearly all the most prominent figures of Ningzhou. If this news spread, her reputation and that of her maiden family, the Xiao clan, would collapse completely. Which lowly person could not control themselves and act it out? Marcus was no fool. Seeing Lady Catherine's panicked and guilty expression, his heart was already clear. Killing intent flooded his eyes. Check every single person. If you cannot find the culprit, bring your heads to see me. Yes. The commander of the guards beside Marcus received the order and immediately led his men away. Before leaving, they invited all the wives, concubines, and children of the G manor, including Lady Catherine and the 2 legitimate sons, to leave the scene. Marcus did not spare a single glance toward the flock of wives and concubines. His gaze stopped intently on Julian, who was vomiting incessantly. How is he? Physician Fu, with a heavy expression, replied, reporting to the master. This servant has given the 6th young master emetics. Judging by what was vomited, the cinnabar poison was placed in the lotus cake the young master just ate. It is true that after young master Julian finished his poem, he ate 2 pieces of lotus cake. Marcus lost his patience, interrupting Physician Fu, asking bluntly, as his life in danger. In the lotus cake, the amount of poison was not small. Clearly, it was aimed to kill. This servant dares not guarantee I can save the young master. I can only do my utmost to treat him. As Physician Fu spoke, his head lowered further, afraid Marcus's rage would fall upon him. No matter what method you use, no matter how many rare spiritual medicines you use, you must save Julian's life. As long as he wakes up, I will reward you with 1,000 taels of silver. If he does not wake up, you prepare to go to the northwest border to serve as an army medic. Marcus understood human nature. He used both pressure and temptation, attacking from 2 sides. At this moment, there was only one thought in his head at all costs: Julian must be saved. Because of the poem just now, Julian would undoubtedly become famous among the scholars and nobles of Ningzhou. Becoming a well-known prodigy was only a matter of time. A distinguished guest today, the prefect of Ningzhou, had personally praised Julian in front of everyone, even removing the belt that symbolized his rank to drape it over Julian. Such respect, far beyond imagination, made people envious. Unexpectedly, the prefect even humbly said that wearing the belt was an injustice to Julian's talent. With such aptitude, sooner or later, he would pass the imperial exams and restore the glory of the Ji ancestors. Those praises made Marcus delirious with joy. Yet, before the joy could last the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, an attempted poisoning occurred to murder Julian. This was not just murder, this was an attempt to uproot the 100-year great enterprise he was building for the House of Ji. Wait until he found out who did it, he would definitely skin that person alive. Whatever is done surely leaves traces. The commander of the guards didn't even need to use all 18 methods of torture to clarify everything within half a day. The investigation revealed how, in recent days, the various concubines' quarters, the mistresses, and the young masters had taken turns using every method to humiliate Julian. Lady Catherine, considering herself noble, did not bother to personally come out to bully Julian, but she had contributed to the winds and waves behind the scenes more than a few times. punishing me to scrub chamber pots was the clearest evidence. Where there are many people, there is much gossip. One or two dirty deeds might be considered small matters, but when they piled up into a heap, even Marcus, who was accustomed to seeing all kinds of struggles in officialdom and had experienced the full flavor of human nature, could not help but be shaken. He could not believe that his own sons, children not yet 10 years old, though not exceptionally intelligent, could be so malicious. No, it is not the children's fault. It is certainly because these lowly concubines taught them poorly. Marcus was furious to the extreme. He ordered his men to beat the bastard sons who had bullied Julian the most with a severe whipping until their buttocks were shredded. As for their mothers, the concubines, they were whipped 10 times in broad daylight, then immediately sold off. The whip was a severe punishment. As soon as a few lashes fell, the victim's clothes would tear open, flesh and blood mingling, leaving no dignity whatsoever. The House of G was a scholarly family famous for benevolence. They rarely used this type of punishment. Today was an exception. Marcus disregarded any lingering affection from having once shared a bed with these women. With a cold face, he ordered the beating without mercy. Furthermore, he summoned all the masters, the bastard children, and the servants of the estate to witness the punishment, clearly showing his intent to kill the chicken to scare the monkey. As each lash fell, blood splattered and screams echoed endlessly, causing everyone's faces to turn pale and their bodies to tremble. The more faint-hearted ones could not hold it in, they vomited or fainted right on the spot. Marcus did not care about those things. He only ordered Julian to be brought back to my courtyard for dedicated treatment. Whether it was the effect of the money or the fear of being exiled to the northwest as an army medic that made them strive, or perhaps Julian simply had a great destiny. After being in a coma for a full day, he slowly woke up. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw Marcus sitting by the bed. His pale, cracked lips moved slightly. "Father." Hearing that weak call, Marcus, who was dozing off, immediately snapped awake and grasped his son's hand tightly. "Julian, is there anywhere that still hurts?" "This son is still fine." Julian shook his head, tears uncontrollably falling. "Father, who was it? Who wanted to take my life? In the future, how will I dare to read books, dare to achieve merit for the G family? Of course, you must study well." Marcus was afraid that because of this incident, Julian would develop fear in his heart and no longer dare to reveal his talent, causing the ray of hope for reviving the clan to be extinguished as soon as it appeared. He hurriedly patted his chest to guarantee. "Julian, you just rest assured and study. Even if the sky falls, Father is here to hold it up. Whoever wanted to harm you, Father will absolutely not forgive. The one who poisoned you with cinnabar must be found." The guards acted like thunder and lightning, investigating meticulously. Finally, they found cinnabar in the courtyard of concubine Sarah. Concubine Sarah naturally denied it desperately. Unfortunately, in the recent period, she was the only one in the entire estate who had purchased cinnabar. Her weak defense had no persuasive power. "Master, this concubine had no intention of killing Julian. I only wanted to kill that lowly wretch Lily Lee." It could no longer be settled quietly. Comparing the pros and cons. Compared to the crime of plotting to murder the most promising son of the G family, the crime of plotting to murder a nameless, lowly concubine was obviously much lighter. She pointed her finger at my face and cursed. "You are just a lowly kitchen maid. On what basis did you give birth to such an intelligent son? Crushing my son until he cannot lift his head. I want you dead. I want your son to live a life worse than death." Concubine Sarah laughed maniacally. She glanced toward where Lady Catherine was sitting, then pulled the silver hairpin from her hair. Without hesitation, she stabbed it into her own neck to commit suicide. Concubine Sarah was a cousin from Lady Catherine's maiden family. Although she was outside the 5 degrees of kinship, the two characters, Xiao, still shared the same root. Thanks to Lady Catherine's shadow, she lived much more respectfully than many other concubines. The dirty deeds that Lady Catherine could not personally handle due to her status were mostly handed over to Sarah to manage. Regarding this poisoning, if one said it had nothing to do with Lady Catherine, Marcus would absolutely not believe it. In the future, if Lady Catherine wanted to plot against Julian again, it would not be as easy as before. But the House of J had not yet recovered. Turning against the Xiao family at this moment was not wise at all. Marcus only frowned and ordered. Concubine Sarah had a venomous heart, plotting to harm concubines in the estate. Now that she has committed suicide to admit her guilt, she has no face to remain in the G family. Send her corpse back to the Xiao family. In this era, laws and customs were extremely harsh toward women. If an unmarried daughter died, she could not be buried in her family's ancestral grave. For someone like concubine Sarah, a criminal rejected by her husband's family, it was even worse. At best, she would be wrapped in a straw mat and thrown into a mass grave to become food for wild beasts. Her son Charles knelt before Marcus, kowtowing incessantly, crying and begging, "Father, please do not drive mother out of the estate. This son begs you." Charles had mediocre aptitude and had been spoiled rotten by Lady Catherine. The more Marcus looked at him, the angrier he became. He raised his foot and delivered a direct kick. "You cannot even distinguish black from white. You are not worthy of being a descendant of the G family. Your mother is a murderer, yet her son dares to act arrogantly in the Great Hall. Your life is considered finished." In recent days, relying on Lady Catherine's favor, Charles had been the one to act against Julian the most. He had even mimicked the sneaky tricks of the inner courtyard, using silver needles to prick Julian time and time again. The one who harms others eventually brings evil retribution upon themselves. The incident of Julian being poisoned was considered closed, and it could only end there. During those days, I stayed by my son's side day and night, caring for him with all my heart. Waiting until the toxins in his body were mostly eliminated, I finally found an opportunity to speak seriously with him. Our four eyes met. My expression had never been so grave. "Julian, promise mother from now on, no matter the circumstances, you must never harm yourself again." Hearing me say this, Julian's expression became a bit awkward, as if he felt guilty. He unconsciously raised his hand to touch his nose. "Mother, what are you saying? This child does not understand. Was it I who poisoned myself?" Julian shook his head instinctively. "Mother, how could I harm myself? You are very smart. You know how to make your father happy, and you also know how to make him angry, but—" I paused, my voice trembling. "For days now, I have been woken up almost every night by nightmares, afraid that if I close my eyes for just a moment, my living child will turn into a cold, dry corpse. You are my son. How can you deceive me?" A mother understands that those evil people will not stop at petty tricks. Sooner or later, they will think of a way to take your life once and for all. Seeing that I had seen through everything completely, Julian decided not to hide it anymore. His immature face took on a maturity inconsistent with his age. There is a saying, one can be a thief for 1,000 days, but no one can guard against a thief forever. Since that is the case, it is better to choose the right moment to create a massive incident, something truly resounding. So father will be forced to investigate thoroughly. "But that is Cinnabar. What if I couldn't save you?" My entire body trembled. I didn't dare imagine the cruelest outcome. To turn the tide, one must be more ruthless than the villain. If it were just a few mild symptoms, how would father believe it? Julian gently used a handkerchief to wipe away the tears on my face, speaking word by word. "Julian wants to protect mother and protect himself. Naturally, I will not die so easily. From now on, the lives of mother and son will be much better." Charles was a stupid and arrogant person. He was never good at hiding things. While bullying Julian, he had inadvertently revealed clues. The cinnabar in concubine Sarah's hands would sooner or later be used on Julian. Since that was so, why not take the initiative to create momentum and give her a helping hand? It was I, the mother, who was incompetent and useless, unable to protect my child within these deep walls, leaving a 5-year-old child to gamble with his life to protect me. I hugged Julian, sobbing uncontrollably. "Julian, you must promise mother, never take such a risk again in the future. If something happens to you—" Julian smiled sweetly. "Mother, rest assured. In the future, there will be no such thing." True to Julian's words, because of that incident, Marcus was afraid someone would continue to harm his son. He protected Julian like a precious pearl in his hand. Even I, as his mother, benefited from his glory. I was exceptionally promoted from a lowly concubine to a noble concubine. Although I still had to stand and serve the master and Lady Catherine during meals every day, I was no longer easily scolded or threatened to be sold. As for Lady Catherine's petty humiliations, as long as they did not endanger my life, I endured them all silently. Not only did I not complain a single word to the master, but I also constantly praised Lady Catherine for being virtuous and caring toward us. Doing so raised Lady Catherine to the clouds. If something happened to Julian, the first person who could not escape involvement would be her. Catherine saw that despite her making things difficult, I endured without resisting. She laughed gloomily. "Don't think I don't know what you are thinking. You venomous, lowly wretch. You hope that in the future your son will become famous so you can share in the glory. Forget that dream soon. A concubine is forever a concubine. You cannot rise to become the main wife, nor a successor wife. Whether I am alive or dead, you will eternally be just a servant standing beside me, serving tea and pouring water. I held the scalding cup of tea that the maid deliberately handed over. My fingertips were burned and blistered, yet my expression did not change in the slightest. I only bowed my head and replied, "The madam is the legitimate mother of Julian. In the future, when Julian succeeds, he will naturally be filial to the madam. This concubine is worth nothing." Of course, I could rely on Julian to resist Lady Catherine. But the more I opposed her, the more crazed her hatred would become. In the long run, who knew if she would risk her life to kill Julian? Even if the master punished her severely afterward, the dead cannot come back to life. For Julian to live peacefully, I, as a mother, would not regret even death, let alone enduring a little suffering. In that endurance, days gradually passed. 4 years later, when Julian was only 9 years old, he took the preliminary exams and passed smoothly, becoming the youngest scholar not only in Ningzhou Prefecture but famous throughout the great Zhou dynasty. His reputation spread far and wide from then on. Julian did not fail people's expectations. 3 years later, he continued to pass the provincial exams to become a provincial graduate at the age of 12. Compared to him, the 2 legitimate sons of Lady Catherine were truly too mediocre. The eldest legitimate son took the exam 3 times just to barely pass the entry level. The second legitimate son was completely unsuited for the scholarly path and had given up long ago. People always gravitate toward profit. Anyone with eyes could see that Julian was absolutely not a flash in the pan. His future was bound to be wide open. The Xiao family were not fools. They immediately and firmly demanded that Lady Catherine take Julian as her own, raising him under her name. In this way, Julian would go from a bastard son to a legitimate son. His status would be elevated, and the bond between the Xiao family and Julian would become even closer. Certain to bring endless benefits in the future. A son who could receive the support of the Xiao clan. The master was naturally very willing to approve. Although Lady Catherine was unreconciled in her heart, she could not disobey the orders of both her maiden family and her husband's family. She had to accept Julian. In this matter, the only one who suffered was me. The ancestral genealogy would be amended. Julian would become Lady Catherine's son. I, a lowly concubine, would henceforth have no children. A childless concubine was no different from a slave. After death, she could not be buried in the Ji family ancestral grave. But for Julian's future, so he would not be ridiculed for his status as a concubine, born son, even if I had to become a wandering ghost, I was willing. However, Julian firmly refused. Seeing this, the master could not help but frown, showing dissatisfaction. "Julian, we are doing this for you. Why are you so ungrateful?" His cold gaze swept over me. "Or is it your mother preventing you?" "Reporting to father-mother did not prevent me. It is I who do not want it." Julian knelt neatly on the ground, speaking slowly, word for word. "Our great Zhou dynasty governs the country through filial piety. If, for the sake of my career, I deny the biological mother who carried me for 10 months and gave birth to me, would that not be great unfilial piety?" Marcus completely did not expect Julian to say such words. His frown deepened. Facing his father's suspicious gaze, Julian spoke again. "Without filial piety, how can there be loyalty? If a man denies even his own biological mother, how can the emperor trust that he will be loyal to the country? If the matter of impersonating a legitimate son is exposed, won't it ruin the 100-year reputation of the House of Ji?" Every word Julian spoke was like a pearl falling to the ground. Seeing the time was right, Julian delivered the final, most crucial sentence. "Father, the current emperor is also a bastard son. He was never recorded under the Empress Dowager's name, nor did he ever pretend to be a legitimate son. If the monarch shares this commonality with his subjects, naturally, he will not do such a thing." These words completely extinguished Marcus's intention to transfer Julian to become a legitimate son. One emperor, one court of ministers. When a new emperor ascends the throne, he must cultivate his own trusted aides. According to what Marcus knew, the emperor had suffered enough grievances in the palace for many years, surviving only thanks to his royal aura. Humans are often prone to getting close to those with similar backgrounds. In the future, if Julian had an audience with the emperor, his status as a bastard son would not be a weakness, but an advantage that would make the emperor look at him differently. For practical benefits, right before his eyes, the adoption matter was finally dropped. Julian also publicly declared that in the future, He would always respect his legitimate mother and his maternal uncles, sharing both fortune and misfortune. Hearing this, the Xiao family had no more words to say. As for Lady Catherine, losing a fake, legitimate son who might compete for inheritance with her two biological sons in the future was actually exactly what she wanted. But in front of me, she still couldn't resist mocking. So what if you have a son? For so many years, you are still just a lowly concubine. Even if you are buried in the Ji ancestral grave, your coffin must be carried in through the side door. In this entire life, do not hope to step through the main gate, nor stand on the ground with your head held high. Right, from the day I became a concubine, my fate was determined. I could not be upright and honorable. But compared to other concubines, I was truly much luckier. I had Julien, son so excellent and promising. As long as he lived well, I asked for nothing more. Another 3 years passed. Amidst my reluctant gaze, not wanting to part, Julien set off for the capital to take the exams. Relying on his outstanding talent, he successfully surpassed thousands of candidates. The handsome 15-year-old youth was personally appointed by the teenage emperor, who was 3 years older than him, as the prime laureate, the top scholar of the land. Perhaps because of their compatible temperaments, the emperor felt a fondness for Julien, like meeting an old friend. At the celebration banquet, the young son of heaven laughed heartily. My beloved subject possesses such talent, yet is so diligent and unceasing in effort. It is truly rare. We grant you permission to ask for a reward. Is there anything you desire? Hearing this, the corners of Julien's eyes immediately turned red. He knelt down neatly, his words ringing out clearly. This subject asks for nothing else. I only humbly beseech your majesty to allow my mother to sit at the dining table properly. True to what was said, the current emperor also came from a bastard background. His biological mother was merely a palace maid whom the late emperor favored while drunk. If the other princes hadn't died prematurely one after another, his turn to succeed the throne would not have come easily. Years in the palace, though outwardly glorious, held hidden bitterness only he understood. Empathizing with each other, he naturally understood Julien's wish. The emperor did not make it difficult. He immediately said, "Then we shall issue a decree, conferring the title of third-rank mandated lady upon both your biological mother and your legitimate mother. From now on, they can both sit upright and dine at the table." The current dynasty did not have a system for equal wives, nor did it allow a concubine to be elevated to a main wife. But for me, a concubine, to be titled a third-rank mandated lady was already an honor unprecedented in the history of the court. Julien held the imperial decree with both hands and brought it before me, his face revealing a relieved smile I had never seen before. He took my hand, leading me step by step to the table, his voice unable to suppress his choking emotion. "Mother, when I was 5, I said I would definitely find a way for you to sit properly at the table and eat. Today, I have finally done it." I could not reply to that sentence, for I was so choked with emotion that I could not utter a word. Julien was very ambitious. At a young age, he entered the Hanlin Academy. Although young, his conduct was very measured and skillful. He quickly received consensus and praise from top to bottom in the academy, and the emperor relied on him even more. By the time he turned 30, he successfully entered the Grand Secretariat, becoming the youngest official in the history of the Great Zhou to do so. Becoming the Grand Secretary was only a matter of time. Under Julien's devoted care, my health was incredibly good. Not only did I successfully outlive Lady Catherine, who had despised me for half a lifetime, but I also saw my husband, Marcus, off first. Another 10 years passed. Seeing Julien's grandson get married and have children, only then was I like an oil lamp running dry, reaching the end of my life. Perhaps it was the phenomenon of terminal lucidity, but before my death, my mind was particularly clear. A gentle, fulfilled smile blossomed on my face. Julien, mother's fate was bitter, born with the status of a lowly servant. But mother was very lucky because I gave birth to a good son like you. In this life, I have no more regrets. Following Julien's sorrowful scream, I contentedly closed my eyes. Perhaps because I was still worried about Julien after death, my soul did not immediately leave. I floated in the air, watching the clansmen arguing noisily over my funeral. Julien was extremely filial. He insisted that my coffin be carried out through the main gate of the Jai estate. As soon as this request was made, it was fiercely opposed by the clan elders. The elders glared, pointing straight at Julien's nose and scolding him like splashing water. "Julien, although you are now an important official of the court, you are still a descendant of the House of Ji. You must obey the rules passed down by the ancestors. Your mother was only a concubine. Being buried in the G family ancestral tomb is already a special exception. How can her coffin go through the main gate? Since ancient times, there has been a distinction between high and low. Your thought is truly treasonous and unfilial. Unless you step over our old bones, the coffin absolutely cannot go through the main gate. As they spoke these words, the eyes of the clan elders revealed arrogance and smugness they could not hide. So what if he is the current Grand Secretary? So what if he is an important minister? Unless Julian was bold enough to request to leave the clan himself, he had to be bound by family rules. I sighed heavily. The human heart is inherently dark. These elders had no outstanding descendants in their own families, and their properties were gradually declining. Meanwhile, Julian's branch was brilliant, his career prosperous. How could they swallow this bitterness? Having finally caught such a good opportunity, naturally, they had to show off and make things difficult for him. Julian had been smart since childhood. He did not want to argue harshly to avoid the reputation of bullying people with power. He simply asked calmly, "Do the elders mean that a concubine cannot go through the main gate? So, if she doesn't go through the main gate, anywhere else is fine, correct?" The elders didn't understand why suddenly ask that. They looked at each other in confusion, thinking he had yielded, so they stroked their beards and nodded smugly. Correct. That is exactly the meaning. In the estate, aside from the main gate, there are only the side doors. Surely Julian wouldn't let his mother's coffin go through the side door or the back door. Wouldn't that be even more laughable? The words of the elders are golden rules. This nephew understands clearly. Julian stood up, bowed to the elders, then turned and left without looking back. Leaving the ancestral hall, he immediately called for the commander of his personal guards, whispering a few instructions into his ear. The commander was a trusted aide among trusted aides. Having followed Julian for many years, upon hearing the words, his eyes lit up. Yes, this subordinate would immediately. No sooner said than done. That very night, a wooden bridge was erected from planks, towering high, bridging over the main gate of the G estate and extending straight to the outside. Seeing this shocking and world-shaking sight, the clan elders and the guests who came to pay respects dropped their jaws. Julian, what is the meaning of this? Yesterday, the elders stated clearly, as long as my mother's coffin does not go through the main gate, going anywhere is fine. Julian knelt before my coffin, heavily smashing a bowl. Raise the spirit. The guards responded with a resounding shout, lifting my coffin and walking slowly across the wooden bridge. As they walked, they chanted, "The first-rank mandated lady, Madame Lily, is departing." Julian raised his head, weeping loudly and tragically. "Mother, do you see? Your unfilial son has won dignity for you." Everyone witnessing this scene was moved to tears. To have a son, one should have a son like Julian. So what if the coffin of his biological mother didn't go through the main gate? He made her go above the main gate, walking right over the heads of the G family ancestors. The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like, subscribe.